Hello, it's Hynes from Wealthi. I hope you're doing well. Today, I just wanted to run through the opportunity that Canberra presents from an investment standpoint. There's a lot to look forward to in the Canberra region at the moment. We're seeing a lot of investment thrown into the city. As it stands, we're seeing projects or infrastructure projects within the medical world, within improving transport links, within improving its presence as well within the country. So there's a lot to look forward to, and we'll run through some of these projects in greater detail through this video. We'll also look at the population growth and the projections for the next 10 to 20, 30 years as well. We'll have a look at some of the rental or the current average rental price as well, the vacancy rate, and a few other bits and pieces in between. But hopefully it paints a good picture around the opportunity that Canberra does present for investors at the moment. And at the end of the video as well, I'll also provide a quick snapshot from a document that we've been provided from one of the developers in Canberra that we're currently working on a number of projects with. So yeah, if you want to have a bit of a chat about any of the projects that we are working on in Canberra, I won't run through them today, but by all means, please feel free to reach out to myself or reach out to the team in Sydney, and we're all more than happy to have a chat to you about those. Now, to start off with, we'll dig into the population statistics. So this is from the Treasury report, or the ACT's population projections, which was released by the Treasury. Now, I was trying to run through it on Population ID, but they don't seem to have the statistics for the ACT itself. So we're going to go with government documents in this case. Apologize, it doesn't look as pretty as usual, but it provides us with the information that we need to know for Canberra moving forward. So as you can see, these statistics as well were taken in 2017. You could say that the COVID pandemic did have a bit of a part to play in terms of migration into Canberra. But it sounds, or judging by what I've read throughout this report, it looks like we're still on track to hit the projected 703,000 people by 2058. Now, if we were to hit that 703,000 by 2058, as you can see, it's almost doubling the population, representing some very, very strong population growth. I read a couple articles today. In fact, there's an article here from the ABC. And this article was released in August of 2021. But Canberra's population is set to double within 40 years, but one developer wants to grow even larger. Now, as you can see, as they've stated in this article, Canberra's population is on track to increase from 432,000 to 700,000 people within 40 years. So it's great to see that those population figures are tracking in the right direction. Now, the second point worth noting within this document is looking at the net interstate migration and net overseas migration into Canberra between 1996 and 2017. And as you can see by this graph that is illustrated on the screen now, Canberra doesn't so much rely on interstate migration. It relies heavily, you could say, on the net overseas migration. And we'll run through it in more detail later, but about 35% of Canberra residents are in fact born overseas. Now, whether they move to Canberra because that's the place of employment, they might be moving into government jobs, given that there's over 50 government bodies within the Canberra region. But it's interesting to note that net overseas migration, we see a lot of it into Canberra as it stands. It isn't you could say the hotspot from a national perspective. Sydney, Perth, and Melbourne still stand above the Canberra net overseas migration. But as you can see, net overseas migration plays a big part for the Canberra region. Now, I'd released an article yesterday, in fact, talking about the net overseas migration and the impact that it could have on the Australian real estate sector from a positive perspective. And I think that Canberra will probably benefit substantially from when border restrictions are eased. As that gradual easing of border restrictions and border closures comes to an end, we'll start to see the net overseas migration back into Canberra. So I think that's just an interesting point worth noting. They're not so heavily reliant on net interstate migration, more so net overseas migration. We see a lot of Canberra residents stay within the ACT region as well. So that is essentially what it is made up of. Now, looking at the projects that are happening in Canberra. So there's a significant amount of investment being thrown into the Canberra region at the moment. We are seeing it's close to $5 billion in infrastructure spending within the budget that was revealed. So this is an article that was published by Infrastructure Magazine. Talks about the Australian Capital Territory has announced a massive $5 billion infrastructure program as part of its 2021 and 2022 ACT budget to create thousands of jobs and support its economic recovery. With 250 projects and 14 ongoing programs of work already underway, the largest infrastructure program in the history of Australian Capital Territory's public sector will support more than 15,000 construction jobs and help reach a goal of more than 250,000 jobs in the territory's economy by 2025. So it's great to see that we're going to be boosting employment with a lot of these projects that are underway or soon to be underway in the Canberra region, and that's going to help keep the economy booming as well. Now, in terms of these projects and where is this money being spent? So health and wellbeing infrastructure funding of $877 million over 5 years to 2025-2026 will include funding of projects such as the Cancer Research Centre in Canberra Hospital, infrastructure upgrades to the Calvary Public Hospital, planning for new car parks at Canberra Hospital, and planning and design for future hospital in Canberra North as well. You're going to see $950 million of funding to be invested in CIT and education infrastructure over the next 5 years. This will help ensure that every child has a great place or a great local public school and support a skilled workforce as we recover from the impacts of the pandemic. In terms of housing, over the next 5 years, infrastructure investment in housing and community support and safety will total $935 million, including over $580 million for public housing growth and renewal. Transport funding of $1.4 billion will allow for upgrades to Canberra's sustainable and connected transport system, upgrades to roads and paths, and improve travel routes around the city as well. We've already seen the light rail project is underway, and the light rail stage 1 is complete. There are a number of other stages that are soon to commence as well. We're looking at stage 2A and stage 2B, which I believe are being done in 2 separate components, but they are going to be, or they have been approved and underway as we speak. Then you've got the suburban infrastructure funding of $8.5 million to be allocated in the 2021-2022 to upgrade and improve major venues, but host major sporting and other events in Canberra. Funding of $2.9 million over 2 years will also be allocated to design and work for car park upgrades at the Forest Park. Emergency services will receive a boost of $12 million for upgrades to facilities across emergency services as well. And there's a few other smaller projects that are referenced down the bottom. I'll leave a link to this article in the description of this video as well if you want to have a read through it. There is also a fantastic report, this one here. So this is the infrastructure plan that was released by the ACT government, and that provides a very solid overview of all the projects that are underway or soon to be underway in Canberra. So I'll leave a link to this as well, and it provides you with a bit more detail around a number of the projects. As I mentioned, we've seen the start of the light rail network. So stage 1, which is this maroon line. Let me just zoom in a little bit more. So stage 1 is this maroon line that you can see on the northern regions of Canberra, and that is completed now. Next is stage 2A and stage 2B, followed by stage 3, which is going to connect Belconnen to the city, and then stage 4, Woden into the city as well. So it's great to see that these projects are underway. They're going to add significant value to a lot of people that live in the city, or investors that have snapped up some property earlier in the year or during the pandemic or prior to that as well. You're going to see a lot of value from this light rail network, which is going to make connectivity around Canberra that little bit more easy as well. And I think it's a fantastic initiative that we're seeing within Canberra as it stands. So this is the completed rail, which was completed in April of 2019. Now, looking at the average rentals, so Canberra has done extremely well over the course of the pandemic, as you can see from this chart that is behind me on the screen here. So in terms of annual change in median asking rental, it saw the second highest annual change in rents, increasing from $600 in January 2020 to $675 a week in December 2021. In terms of the quarterly change, it had the strongest quarterly change towards the back end of last year. From September to December, it increased 4.7%, which represented about a $30 increase in rent per week over that 3-month period. So fantastic to see that rents are heading in the right direction. I'm sure there's a few people out there that are semi-cautious, you could say, about whether their tenants are going to be capable of paying the higher rents that we're seeing in the Canberra region. I think that when you're looking at these rents, it's important to understand the caliber and the clientele that you're targeting for your investment property. The average salary for a resident that's living in Canberra sits at about $95,000. When you compare that to the national average of Australia, that sits at about $62,500. So I think that the caliber of tenants that we're looking for our investment properties in Canberra have the means to afford these slightly higher rents when you compare it to the other rents within the nation. It does place Canberra at the top end from a rental perspective, which makes the affordability, the affordability question comes into play when we're looking at the gap between a rental property and, not a rental property, when we're looking at the gap between a house and a unit in Canberra, it also does have the largest difference, you could say, between between the price of a unit and the price of a house as well. Now, there aren't a great deal of houses coming to market. There's a lack of housing stock within the Canberra region, which is why we're seeing a lot of apartment developments and residential developments popping up in Canberra at the moment. There's a huge pipeline of projects coming forward over the next 12 to 24 months from a residential unit perspective to keep up with the demand for accommodation in Canberra's inner city locations as it stands. So I think that when you're comparing the house, when you're comparing a unit purchase in Canberra, they are almost two completely different markets, you could say. The people that are looking for these apartments are going to be people like your young professionals that want to be close to the city, a young family that don't have, you could say, the family needs of needing a backyard and wanting that outdoor space, but are happy with inner city living, accessibility to their place of employment, accessibility to the amenity that they need, being, let's say, a Westfield or shops and cafes and bars on their doorstep as well, and enjoying that inner city living, you could say. Also, when you're looking at the difference between the units and the houses as well, from a price point perspective, the average price of a unit in Canberra sits at about $501,000 for the average price of a unit in Canberra. When you look at the average price of a home or a house in Canberra, that sits up closer to that $850,000 mark. So from an accessibility perspective, if you can get in and snag one of these apartments in inner city location in Canberra, benefit from some very strong rentals, you're going to see some very, very generous returns as well. So I think from a cash flow perspective, Canberra makes a lot of sense from that regard. Now, looking at the vacancy rates, which also ties into this was released by Domain towards the back end of last year, in fact, October last year. So looking at the vacancy rate for Canberra, you're looking at a 0.9% vacancy rate, so an extremely low number when you compare it to the three other major cities that we commonly refer to, your Sydney, your Melbourne and Brisbane. You could say it stands head and shoulders above those three. And 0.9% shows us that tenants are looking to stay put, you could say, and a lot of this stock as well is being snapped up. There's a need for this accommodation. People want to be in these new developments. They want the new gym downstairs. They want the concierge service downstairs as well. We're looking at these premium products that offer these services for the clientele and the tenants that we're looking to place in our property. Now, lastly, I just wanted to run over this document very quickly. So we're working on a number of projects at the moment with a very well-known Australian developer called Geocom, and this is some of the collateral that they provide for their projects at the moment. Now, some of these numbers aren't updated given that COVID slightly changed some of the predictions and some of the figures that we were seeing in the pre-COVID days. But it provides us with a very solid overview of Canberra, why we should be considering Canberra as an investment opportunity at the moment. And I'll run through some of the points in the screen that you can see below me. From a demographic perspective, there's over 1 million people that live in the capital region. In terms of population growth, some of the fastest population growth that is being experienced in Australia, it's about 2%. We mentioned the net overseas migration. Once these borders open as well, Canberra is going to be a massive, you could say, it will reap great reward from borders reopening when we see the interstate migration come back into the Canberra region. In terms of residents in Canberra, as I mentioned as well earlier, about 35% of Canberra residents are born overseas. The economy, 4.25%, which represents the fastest economic growth and most secure economies in Australia. In terms of rent, 0.8%. It now sits at 0.9%, but making it some of the lowest vacancy rates in the country. From a credit perspective, Canberra is one of 3 Australian jurisdictions with a AAA credit rating. 5.6% is the average apartment gross rental yield. Looking at your employment, you've got over 50 federal government agencies within the city as well. Employment, or the unemployment rate, is extremely low at 3%. We mentioned the average salary of about $95,000. These stats, of course, were taken about 2 or 3 years ago now, but that's now sitting at about $95,000. Average household income at the time that this was taken, about $1,645 a week. In terms of education, 63,000 tertiary students in Canberra, with 5 universities ranked within the top 150 in the world. Over 12,000 students, international students, enroll in Canberra universities annually. 1 in 6 Canberrians study or work in education. So it's great to see that we're seeing that investment in the educational sector as well within Canberra. In fact, I will run over that very quickly now. So CIT campus in Woden, which is the Canberra Institute of Technology, which is seeing a substantial investment thrown at that as well over the next few years. We mentioned the Canberra Hospital expansion and then the City to Woden light rail. We are working on a project or a couple of projects in Woden at the moment. We've also got one in Belconnen. So they're all going to reap the reward of the light rail that is being placed down as we speak. Going back to this chart here. So we mentioned the Canberra light rail. Stage 1 is completed in 2019. In terms of the area itself and connectivity, 30 minutes from anywhere in Canberra to the international airport. So great from a connectivity standpoint. Canberra Airport sees about 800 flights per week to Australian cities, Singapore and Doha. Food and drink, you've got vineyards within 35-minute drive to the CBD. So it's ticking, you could say, one of the boxes from a lifestyle perspective as well. People looking to enjoy the great outdoors, you can take a 35-minute drive and be at some beautiful vineyards in the region. Award-winning baristas, including world #1 baristas, and 13 Chef Hat award-winning restaurants in the city as well. You've got 7 national sporting teams in the area, 58 museums and galleries in the region. That once again ticks the lifestyle perspective. Tourism, Canberra sees about 4.4 million visitors per year. In 2018, Lonely Planet ranked Canberra as the 3rd best city in the world to visit, and there's around 194,000 international visitors annually into the city. In terms of the industry, Canberra boasts an entrepreneurship culture with the largest number of patents and trademarks per capita in Australia. 25,000 private companies operate in Canberra, 144,000 jobs in the private health and social assistance sector as well. So it ticks a lot of boxes from an investment standpoint. We're seeing investment currently being thrown into a number of infrastructure projects within the region, make that the medical world, improving transport links, the educational sector as well. So it's great to see that they're not putting all their eggs in one basket and just focusing on one major project, but trying to improve the city as a whole. You've got great education in the city, some of the most highly regarded universities in the world. You've got connectivity from an international standpoint with the airport. The unemployment rate also sits at an extremely low level. We're seeing some of the strongest population growth in the country as well. Vacancy rates extremely low, rents are extremely high. It's ticking the boxes that we are wanting to be ticked for an investment. So I hope that's answered a few questions that you may have been thinking at the moment. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to myself, reach out to the team in Sydney, and each and every one of us is more than happy to have a chat with you. Once again, thank you for listening. And if you've got any questions, please reach out. Have a fantastic week, and I look forward to talking to you all soon. Thank you.